You guys might not think of it, but you're a very intimidating group of people. You know, we can all sit there like Terry and make silly comments during class, but when you stand up here, it's just a whole different ball of wax. I was at work yesterday, and I get this text from Amanda that Trisus is sick. He can't even raise his head and text, and he needs somebody to preach for him this afternoon. So that's never a fun text to get. This is going to be a little bit of recap for Logan and Elijah, some of the stuff that they've had in class. So if their eyes start rolling back in their head a little bit, they've had it before. If I was going to title this lesson, it would have to be that God has surround sound. Every one of us, probably in this building, has been to a movie theater at one time in our lives. And the most prominent thing about a movie theater is the sound. And when you go to a theater, you get to hear a door close in one corner, you hear something, a gunshot from another corner, somebody laugh from another corner, and surround sound is pretty neat. And the first time I ever experienced it in somebody's home, we were still living in Texas years and years ago and saw the original Batman, the Michael Keaton version that they probably should have just stopped with right there because it was good. But saw the original Batman to surround sound. And the sound just permeated everything about you, permeated all your senses. It's very, very neat the first time you actually experienced it in a living room. And so when I look at God's wisdom and I compare God's wisdom to surround sound, and I see how God's wisdom permeates everything, and then I look at my wisdom, and I have to think, I'm reminded of the little AM transistor radios that we had, you know, when we were young. I like the older people because they know these things, and when you took it apart, it had a speaker about the size of a quarter. And so I look at my wisdom at this little bitty transistor radio speaker about the size of a quarter versus God's surround sound system, and that's His wisdom. And so it's just something, it's very humbling when you really realize just how awe-inspiring God's wisdom is. God created me. God created you. God created everything that there is in existence. Tim did an excellent job of giving us evidence of that this morning, so we're not going to go over that. But when God creates an object, being me or whatever, that object has no rights whatsoever. The object that's created, it doesn't have any rights. I can go out after a rainstorm and I can go to a mud puddle and I can sift up some mud and I can create a bowl. No, I can't create a bowl. I have no skill. But it reminds me of the song, you know, Thou art the potter, we are the... Help me out. Anyway, Thou art the potter, we are the clay. Anyway, we're always referred to as a bowl of clay that the potter, the master potter, has done. Me and my primitive skills, I could make a stick out of mud, or I could make a round ball or a square object or something like that. But if I make a round mud ball, I have created an object. Does that object have any rights? That object can't say, hey, you have to take me on vacation this year, or you have to cook me breakfast, or you have to bake me in an oven and make me a hard round ball. You know, that object has no rights whatsoever. Now, I know that object because I created it, so that object is mine. You know, once I've created that object, I can say, oh, I get to stomp you, or I get to keep you, or I get to do whatever I want with you. I can leave you out in the rain. I can do whatever because you are mine. That object is mine. And so God, He created us. And another thing I forgot is that object, that ball may have the ability to do something. If I'm good enough and I can make it round enough, it'll actually roll. I mean, it has the ability to roll if I put it on a slope. But that ball has no rights or anything like that. And so God, He did us one better when God created us. God didn't create us just as an object. God created us as a being. God didn't just make me some unfeeling solid mass of nothing. God made me a being that has a soul, that has a brain, that has reasoning ability, so be it not as good as others, but yet God created us as beings. So He did us a much better favor than I'm going to go out and just create this mud ball. So the burning question that we have to ask ourselves is, if God in His infinite wisdom can create me, and so much better than I can create a mud ball, because I don't even have the ability to give a mud ball, make it a being or give it a soul. So if God has the ability to do this for us, why would we not choose to follow the one that created us and the one that has such infinite wisdom? And so that's the burning question that you always have to ask yourself is, why? Because we all do it. We all go up times, we go through periods in our life when we do not follow God. And we have to ask ourselves why, because it doesn't make any sense at all, because He is the one that created us. I want you to picture a scenario. If you're a child of 8 to 11 or so, and we've all been children of age 8 to 11, and you're asleep in your house, and you're asleep in your upstairs bedroom. You know, your house is 2 or 3 story, whatever, but you're in an upstairs bedroom, and you're sound asleep in the middle of the night, and suddenly you're woke up by a commotion outside. And you woke up and then you stumble over to the window to see what's going on, and you raise the window and you're sleepy as could be, but your senses, you suddenly wake up because your dad is standing outside in the front yard and he's screaming at you, jump out the window. Come to me, jump out the window. Well, if you're 8 to 11 years old, you've probably been told all your life by your dad, don't jump out the window because you'll hurt yourself. You'll die, at least in the best case scenario, you'll break an ankle. But suddenly your dad is there yelling and in a very agitated manner to tell you to jump out the window. Well, you, in your narrow little box in your bedroom, you can't see the big picture. Your dad, standing from his back viewpoint, can tell that the house is on fire and the whole or part of the first floor is engulfed in flames, and that your only chance to escape and survive is to jump out the window. So out of love for you, your dad is trying to save you and tell you, hey, jump out of your bedroom window, the rest of the house is burning. And so, are you going to do it? That's the question. And the question is, do you have a relationship with your dad to trust enough to jump out and do his will? This scenario actually exhibits God's control and his power over us and God's wisdom, because your dad, when he's back away from the house, he can see the big picture. That the fact that the house is on fire and you're in your little window and you can't tell that anything's wrong. You think you're perfectly safe. So do you really want to follow his wishes? God can see the big picture with us. God created us. God has always existed. God will always exist. God, in his infinite wisdom, he created us. God has perfect character. And so God is the big picture. Not only can your dad just see the big picture, God is the big picture. He's actually, so much smarter than your father who's telling you to jump out the window. And so since God has this infinite wisdom, right and wrong are based on God's perfect character and his infinite wisdom. God created us fully, and he knows us fully. Just like I created a little mud ball, and I can tell you, well, there's no sticks in it. I made it. I took all the rocks out. That's just pure mud. It's a great mud ball. I know that mud ball inside and out. God created us. He knows us inside and out. And so he knows, because he knows us well, he knows what's best for us, and he knows he has the ability, and he makes the rules for our lives. Jeremiah, I want to quickly read Jeremiah chapter 10, verse 23. I know, O Lord, that the way of man is not in himself, that it is not in man who walks to direct his steps. What's Jeremiah telling us? He's telling us that as mankind, we can't direct our own steps. We're not capable of directing our own steps. I think anybody over teenage years can look around and see somebody whose life has been wrecked because they refused to submit to God's will and God was not directing their steps. You look through history, nations that have turned their back on God. So many things point us to the common sense of letting God direct his steps, direct our steps. Just like gravity holds us to the ground, God's laws hold us to the big picture, and God's laws hold us to what is right. So can we honestly say we trust in the one who is the big picture, who sees the big picture? Romans chapter 16, verse 27. Let's read that. To the only wise God be glory forever through Jesus Christ. Amen. God is the only wise God. There's only one God. He's the only one and only wise God. He is the very standard of right and wrong. And because of this, we should always trust him to guide us. As our Creator, God has the right to control us, to guide us, to tell us what to do, simply because he created us. Just like the example of, me creating the mud ball. That ball's mine. I have the right to do with it whatever I want. It has no rights. Like I said earlier, God gave us some rights. He gave us the power to choose yes or no, and whether we want to follow him, and he made us free moral agents. But God has the right to control us because he created us. But yet when we look deeper and delve deeper into this, and when we focus on God's wisdom, we realize that he also has the ability to control us because he's so wise. Not only does he have the right, he has the ability. How many of us would fail miserably if we tried to control other people's lives, especially in an entire world of lives? God can do it because he has the ability. And he can tell us what is wrong and what is right. God also knows the past and the present and the future. So who better to say we trust? I can actually stand before you and say I trust God to make the decisions in my life. Now I can't say that I'm perfect. I can't say that I always do that. But I can say that that is my goal in life, is that I trust God to make the decisions for my life. We may not always understand the rules that God set before us. but we can also understand, we may not understand them, we may not realize them fully, but we can understand the fact that when he created these rules for us to live by, he created it with a big picture in mind. He had a viewpoint of everything from the beginning of the earth to the end of the earth. And it goes back to the burning house scenario. When we're in our little bedroom and can't see outside and can't see the dangers of sin or what's around us, God created us, and he gave us this set of rules to live by because he can see the whole big picture. Submission to God is the only way to true happiness and success in life. I think we can all agree on that. The only way to be truly happy and successful in life is to submit to God. And I've just made a very key point. But before I continue the key point about submission, I would like to talk to you about three words, about trust and power and wisdom. When you go back to the burning house scenario, I, as a child, will jump out that window to my father if and only if I trust him. And how do I trust him? How do you trust someone so much that with your life? Hopefully, your father has been there for you every day of your life, and by the time you're a child old enough to have your own bedroom, in or upstairs, you have developed a trust with your father because your father has never failed you. He's taken care of you, and you guys get along, and you have this wonderful relationship with your father. And so you trust in your father to jump out the window. We cannot harp enough on the fact that we have to have a relationship with God. If we don't know him, if we don't have a relationship with him, how can we trust him? To me, it makes so much sense. And when you trust, let's define trust. Trust means to believe that someone is good and will do what is right, or to believe something because you are sure that it is true. And the third definition for trust is firm belief in the reliability, truth, or ability of someone or something. And so, once again, you're not going to trust your father to jump out of that window unless you have a relationship with him. Because a total stranger, you don't trust, you'll just go back to bed and think they're a cuckoo. But your father, you're going to trust him because he has raised you from a child. Let's talk about power. Power is the ability to do something or act in a particular way. And it's also defined as the ability to direct or influence the behavior of others. But the one I want to look at is power is the ability to do something or act in a particular way. My little mud ball I created has no power. God created me. God gave me a soul. He gave me a brain. He gave me reasoning ability. I have power. I have power to make a choice in my life. Fortunately, in the United States, we have power to make a lot more choices than you do in other nations. But God gave me the power to make my own decisions. Now let's look at wisdom. The best way that you can define wisdom is to say that wisdom is the power to put our time and our knowledge to proper use. So to say it, we need to be smart enough or wise enough to exercise our power of free choice to trust God and submit to God. Trust is senseless without submission. Yes, it's something to say, I trust in God, but if you don't submit to God, the two don't go hand in hand. So once again, we need to be wise enough or smart enough to exercise our own power of being a free moral agent to trust in God and ultimately submit to God. Now, you can sit up here and you can talk about the benefits of submission and give examples, but if you don't give a biblical example, then maybe they're just empty words. And so, does the Bible have a biblical example of someone who's trusted in God and submitted his will to God? Of course, there are tons of them. And I have to think that my favorite is probably Gideon. Gideon, when the angel first approached Gideon, I think Gideon was threshing on the threshold floor. You can correct me after church if I'm wrong. But when the angel first approached Gideon and told him he was going to become basically God's army, he was going to do something mighty for God, Gideon said, no thank you. He said, I belong to the weakest clan. Of all the tribes of Israel or the clans, my clan's the weakest. And not only is my clan the weakest, I'm the weakest weakling of the people in my clan. So Gideon was scared to death. You almost picture him as a timid little man that's scared of everything because Gideon, it's funny, he said, I'm not only the member of the weakest clan, I'm the weakest member of the weakest clan. But Gideon was convinced, and he was not coerced. He was convinced, and he made his own choice to follow God. It took a little bit of convincing. He went through the test of, he asked God, he said, he put out a fleece of wool, and he put out a fleece of wool in the field and said, God, if you will please show me a sign, I will do your bidding. And if you'll make the fleece wet and the rest of the ground dry, I'll do your bidding. Well, of course, he was able to, I forgot how many bowls of water he was able to wring out of the fleece the next morning because it was dripping wet. But Gideon needed another sign. He also, to help him convince to, make his free moral agent trust deciding power kick in, he needed another sign. He said, God, would you please I'm going to put this fleece out again, and would you please make the fleece dry and make everything else wet? And of course, God did it again. And so then Gideon, I think he had 20,000 men that volunteered to go help. I think it's 22,000. And so God told Gideon, he said, this is not enough. You have too many men. If I hand the Midianites over to you with this many men, then the men will be able to say, God didn't help us. We did it ourselves because you have too many. So God said, I'm going to have to whittle the numbers down a little bit. And through the whittling process, eventually ended up, he told them to drink out of a stream. And the ones who lapped from their hands like a dog, he kept. And the ones that knelt down and lapped up like a dog, he didn't. And so anyway, he kept 300 people. Long story short, Gideon, with the help of 300 men and the darkness of the night and candles in vases and trumpets, Gideon was responsible for killing or seeing the death of over 120,000 Midianite enemies. And so Gideon, the weakest member of the weakest clan who didn't want to do God's bidding, once he trusted in God and submitted to God, he was a true hero, and he was able to basically wipe out the Midianite army. And so, and then he became to be, an astounding success later on. So he actually used his power to trust in God. I want to wrap something up here by reading Psalms 19, verses 7 through 11. Psalms is in the Old Testament, excuse me. The law of the Lord is perfect, reviving the soul. The testimony of the Lord is sure, making wise the simple. The precepts of the Lord are right, rejoicing the heart. The commandment of the Lord is pure, enlightening the eyes. The fear of the Lord is clean, enduring forever. The rules of the Lord are true and righteous altogether. More to be desired are they than gold, even much fine gold, sweeter than honey and drippings of the honeycomb. Moreover, by them is your servant warned. In keeping them there is great reward. So what he's telling us is that if you submit to the Lord, there are certain benefits that come from it. And this is just a brief synopsis of some of the benefits, but it revives the soul. It makes the simpleton, like me, wise in God's Word. It rejoices the heart. It enlightens the eyes. It allows you to experience the enduring love of God forever. So there are so many benefits to submitting to God's will. It makes sense. And when you look at the fact that God created us and that God in His infinite wisdom has the right to guide our lives and also has the ability to guide our lives, you have to realize that, hey, this is not just common sense, but this is godly sense also. It's what's called godly wisdom. I want to recap what we've said. God created us, and we're an object. He has the right and the ability to control us. He is the big picture. When you go back to the scenario of the father telling his child to jump out the window because the father can see the big picture. God is our big picture. And right now, if you look at it, God is telling us to jump out of our burning bedroom window of sin. When we have to think about it that way, God knows what's best for us, and God knows that sin is not what's best for us. So God, in His infinite wisdom, is telling us, hey, get out of your little narrow box and come and join my world, because I can see everything about you, and you need to jump out of your little burning bedroom window of sin and be baptized and do what it takes to become a child of God and put me on. And that's what God wants for us, because God knows what's best for us. So if you have anything that you want to talk about before the church, I would like for you to come up after we sing. If you want to be baptized, if you have any needs of us that you want to tell about in a public manner, just please do it as we stand and sing.